Hello, and welcome. I'm glad you're here tonight. Perhaps your day has been long, or maybe you're just ready to let everything slow down and soften. Let your breathing find its own gentle rhythm. There's nothing you need to do right now except rest. Did you know that seahorses are among the slowest swimmers in the entire ocean, drifting through the water at their own peaceful pace? Tonight we're drifting through the quiet world of seahorses. In this gentle journey, you'll hear about these soft creatures who anchor themselves to swaying seagrass, who dance with their mates at dawn, and who live their patient lives in shallow, sunlit waters. Some of what you hear may simply wash over you as you settle deeper into rest. And if you're still awake, you're welcome to leave a quiet comment with what time it is for you or where you're listening from tonight. It's always peaceful seeing people from so many different places settling in at their own moment. And if these quiet ocean journeys help you unwind, you're always welcome to subscribe so you can drift off with us whenever you need. Now let your body grow a little heavier as we begin. Long before humans walked the earth, long before the continents took their current shapes, the ancestors of seahorses were already swimming through ancient seas. The story of how seahorses came to be is written in stone, in genes, and in the very shape of their bodies. It's a story that reaches back millions of years to a time when the world's oceans were warmer and shallower, when vast seagrass meadows carpeted the seafloor in ways we can barely imagine today. Scientists believe that seahorses evolved from pipefish, their close relatives, during a period called the Late Oligocene, roughly 25 million years ago. This was a time of dramatic change in Earth's oceans. Tectonic forces were shifting continents, creating new shallow coastal waters, particularly in what is now the Western Pacific Ocean. As these shallow waters expanded, so too did the seagrass beds, coral reefs, and mangrove forests that would become perfect homes for an unusual new kind of fish. The evolution from pipefish to seahorse was driven, researchers believe, by the mechanics of hunting. The upright posture that makes seahorses so distinctive actually gives them a hunting advantage. This vertical position allows them to approach prey from unusual angles, to strike from above with their tubular snouts, capturing small crustaceans with remarkable precision. While their pipefish cousins swim horizontally, seahorses learn to hover upright among the vertical stems of seagrass, perfectly positioned to ambush passing meals. The fossil record of seahorses is frustratingly sparse, as their delicate bodies rarely preserve well in stone. But the few fossils we have tell us that seahorses have looked remarkably similar for millions of years. The specimens of an ancient species show the same basic body plan, the same upright posture, the same prehensile tail wrapped around ancient strands of vegetation frozen in time. What's truly remarkable is how quickly seahorses have evolved at the genetic level. In 2016, scientists studying the seahorse genome made an astonishing discovery. The seahorse genome, they found, is the most rapidly evolving fish genome ever studied. This means that while seahorses may look the same on the outside over millions of years, on the inside, at the level of DNA, they've been changing at an extraordinary pace, adapting to new environments, new prey, new challenges, with remarkable speed. The name seahorse itself speaks to how long humans have been enchanted by these creatures. The scientific name for seahorses is hippocampus, from ancient Greek words. Hippos means horse, and campus means sea monster or sea animal. Ancient Greek poets used this word to describe mythical creatures, half horse and half fish, that pulled the chariots of sea gods through underwater realms. When naturalists finally classified these real animals centuries later, the name seemed perfect. A horse's head on a fish's body, a creature that seemed to bridge the gap between two worlds. From their origins in the Western Pacific, seahorses eventually spread throughout the world's oceans. Molecular evidence suggests that seahorses invaded the Atlantic Ocean not once, but twice, in two separate migrations over millions of years. Today, seahorses can be found in coastal waters on every continent except Antarctica, from the cold waters off the coast of Britain to the tropical reefs of Southeast Asia, from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, from Japan to Australia and New Zealand. As you rest tonight, imagine those ancient shallow seas, warm and clear, carpeted with swaying seagrass. Imagine the first seahorses, learning to swim upright, learning to wrap their tails around stems, learning to hunt with patience and precision. They've been perfecting their unusual way of life for 25 million years, and they're still here, still swaying gently in the currents, still teaching us that sometimes the most unusual approaches to life are also the most successful. If you were to see a seahorse for the first time without knowing what it was, you might struggle to believe it was a fish at all. Every part of a seahorse's anatomy seems designed to defy expectations, to challenge what we think we know about how fish should look and move and live. And yet, despite their strangeness, every feature of a seahorse serves a purpose, refined over millions of years of evolution. Let's begin with that unmistakable head, the feature that gives seahorses their name. The head is bent at nearly a 90-degree angle from the body, creating a distinctive profile that does indeed resemble a horse's head, complete with an elongated snout and what appears to be a thoughtful expression. But this is no mere coincidence of shape. The bent neck allows seahorses to strike at prey from their upright swimming position, turning their entire body into a kind of hunting posture. On top of each seahorse's head sits a crown-like structure called a coronet. This cluster of spines and ridges is as unique to each seahorse as a human fingerprint is to us. No two coronets are exactly alike. Scientists can use these distinctive shapes to identify individual seahorses in the wild, tracking them over weeks and months, learning about their behaviors and territories and lives. The coronet's shape and size varies between species, and within species, making each seahorse beautifully, uniquely itself. The eyes of a seahorse are large, prominent, and capable of something quite extraordinary. Each eye can move independently of the other, just like a chameleon's eyes. While one eye looks forward, the other might be scanning backward. While one focuses on prey, the other watches for danger. This gives seahorses an enormous field of vision, allowing them to see almost everything around them without moving their heads. For a creature that prefers to remain motionless while hunting, this independent eye movement is invaluable. The snout deserves special attention, for it is one of the seahorse's most remarkable features. Long, tubular, and fused into a single piece, the snout functions like a pipette or a straw. It has no teeth, no jaw that opens and closes in the traditional sense. Instead, the seahorse positions this snout near its prey and creates a powerful vacuum, sucking water and prey into its mouth in a fraction of a second. This happens so fast that tiny crustaceans have almost no time to react, no chance to escape. The snout is perfectly adapted for this strike and suck feeding method, so effective that seahorses have one of the highest hunting success rates in the animal kingdom. Now let's consider the body itself, covered not in scales like most fish, but in bony armor. Seahorses belong to a group of fish that have evolved an exoskeleton, a series of hard, bony plates that fit together like rings around their body. These plates are covered with a thin layer of skin, giving seahorses their distinctive ridged, armored appearance. The number of these rings varies by species, and counting them from the first trunk ring to the last is one way scientists identify different types of seahorses. This armor provides protection from predators, many of which find seahorses difficult or impossible to swallow because of their hard, angular bodies. Because of this external skeleton, seahorses no longer have ribs. The bony plates have taken over the structural support that ribs would normally provide. This is one of many trade-offs in the seahorse's unusual design. Protection from the outside, but less flexibility, less ability to bend and twist like other fish. The tail is perhaps the most chameleon-like feature of all. Prehensile, which means capable of grasping. The seahorse's tail can wrap around seagrass blades, coral branches, or any suitable anchor point with remarkable dexterity. The tail coils and uncoils with muscular precision, providing stability in currents, preventing the seahorse from being swept away during storms. Unlike other fish tails that propel the animal through water, the seahorse tail is primarily a tool for holding on, for staying in one place in a world of constant motion. Seahorses cannot bend their tails backward, only forward in that distinctive curl. The tail is also surprisingly strong. Male seahorses sometimes use their tails in conflicts with other males, pushing and wrestling over territory or mates, though these contests are generally gentle by animal standards, more display than violence. For movement, seahorses rely on fins that seem almost too small for the job. The dorsal fin, located on the back, flutters at an astonishing rate, sometimes 35 times per second, sometimes as many as 70 times per second depending on the species. This rapid flutter creates forward propulsion, but it's exhaustingly inefficient. The dorsal fin is delicate, translucent, catching the light like a tiny gossamer sail. On either side of the head, just behind the eyes, are the pectoral fins, small ear-like structures that help with steering and stability. By adjusting the movement of these fins, seahorses can move up and down in the water column, turn left or right, hover in place, but they lack the powerful caudal fin that most fish use for swimming. This makes them slow, extraordinarily slow, but also precise in their movements. And then there's what seahorses lack that makes them even more unusual. They have no teeth. Their digestive system is remarkably simple, just a straight tube from mouth to anus with no stomach to store food. This means that anything a seahorse eats must be small enough to fit through its narrow snout, and it must be digested almost immediately. Food passes through a seahorse's body in mere hours, which means seahorses must eat almost constantly, consuming dozens or even thousands of tiny prey items every single day. This lack of a stomach explains much about seahorse behavior. Why they hunt so often, why they must remain near reliable food sources, why they can't store energy for lean times. It's a simple digestive system, perhaps too simple, but it works for them in their specialized niche. Inside the body, a swim bladder helps seahorses maintain buoyancy, adjusting the amount of gas inside to rise or sink in the water. This is one feature they share with most other fish, but so much else about them is different, so much else is strange and wonderful. The sizes of seahorses vary dramatically by species. The smallest known seahorse, Satomi's pygmy seahorse, measures just over 1 centimeter, barely longer than a grain of rice. At the other end of the scale, the big-bellied seahorse from Australian and New Zealand waters can reach 35 centimeters, well over a foot in length from the tip of the tail to the top of the coronet. And here's something truly remarkable about seahorse genetics. Recent research has revealed that seahorses have lost hundreds of genes that other fish possess. Bargibant's pygmy seahorse, for instance, has completely lost 438 genes, with hundreds more so degraded they no longer function. Scientists suspect some of these lost or damaged genes relate to immunity to coral venom, allowing pygmy seahorses to live directly on Gorgonian corals without harm. Evolution has shaped seahorses not just by adding features, but by taking away unnecessary ones, streamlining them for their specific way of life. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine the seahorse's body in all its intricate detail, the bony plates fitting together like puzzle pieces, the eyes moving independently, watching the underwater world from two perspectives at once, the prehensile tail coiled around a blade of grass, anchoring the seahorse against the gentle current, the dorsal fin fluttering invisibly fast, catching the light. Every part perfectly adapted, perfectly suited, perfectly strange. The slowest swimmers in the sea. In an ocean full of swift predators and agile prey, the seahorse has chosen a different path. While dolphins shoot through the water at speeds exceeding 30 kilometers per hour, while tuna race across entire ocean basins, seahorses move at a pace so glacial it almost defies belief. The dwarf seahorse in particular holds a special distinction. It is recognized as the slowest moving fish in the entire world. How slow? The dwarf seahorse, Hippocampus zosterae, has a top speed of about 1.5 meters per hour. That's roughly 5 feet per hour. You could walk past one of these seahorses, pause to tie your shoe, and by the time you finished, the seahorse would have moved less than the length of your hand. For perspective, garden snails move faster than dwarf seahorses. Sea turtles, often thought of as leisurely swimmers, are speed demons in comparison. This extraordinary slowness comes from the seahorse's method of propulsion. Remember that rapidly fluttering dorsal fin, beating dozens of times per second. It's working as hard as it possibly can, but the fin is simply too small, the seahorse's body too strangely shaped for efficient swimming. The upright posture creates enormous drag, like trying to push a wall through water instead of a streamlined torpedo. The small pectoral fins on the sides of the head help with steering and stability, allowing seahorses to move precisely even if they can't move quickly. A seahorse can hover nearly motionless, making tiny adjustments to position, turning in place, rising and sinking with subtle control. This precision matters more than speed for their lifestyle. Moving through water requires enormous energy for seahorses. The constant flutter of the dorsal fin is exhausting work. This is why seahorses spend so much of their time resting, anchored by their tails to vegetation or coral. They conserve energy whenever possible, moving only when necessary, when they need to find food, escape danger, or approach a mate. Some seahorse species have been observed dying during storms, not from injury, but from exhaustion. When strong currents or waves batter a seahorse for hours, forcing it to swim constantly just to avoid being swept away, the little animal simply runs out of energy. Its dorsal fin gives out, its body goes limp, and it's carried off by the current. For creatures that move so slowly, the ocean's power can be deadly. This vulnerability to currents explains why seahorses are almost always found in calm, sheltered waters. They favor seagrass beds in quiet bays, mangrove roots in protected lagoons, coral reefs on the leeward side of islands where the water remains relatively still. They need environments where the water moves gently enough that their limited swimming ability is sufficient. During winter months, many seahorse species migrate, but calling it migration hardly seems appropriate given their speed. They move from shallow waters to slightly deeper waters to escape the rougher conditions of winter storms and cold temperatures. But this migration might cover only a few dozen meters over the course of weeks. It's less a journey and more a slow, patient relocation. The seahorse's vertical swimming posture, while unusual, offers some advantages despite the swimming inefficiency it creates. Swimming upright allows seahorses to navigate dense vegetation that would snag horizontally swimming fish. They can weave between seagrass blades, slip through clusters of coral, occupy spaces other fish can't easily reach. In a sense, they've traded speed for accessibility, choosing to live in three-dimensional complexity rather than open water. There's something almost meditative about the seahorse's pace, while the ocean around them fills with frantic activity. With fish darting and swirling, with currents rushing and tides pulling, seahorses remain calm, unhurried, present. They don't race after prey, they wait for it. They don't flee from predators at high speed, they hide, they blend, they disappear into their surroundings. Their slowness has become a kind of patience, a different strategy for survival. In captivity, when seahorses are placed in aquariums with faster fish, they often struggle to compete for food. By the time a seahorse has positioned itself near a morsel of food and sucked it in, quicker fish have already snatched everything away. This is why aquarists who keep seahorses often create species-specific tanks, where the seahorse's slowness isn't a disadvantage, where they can feed at their own gentle pace without competition. The vertical swimming posture may have evolved specifically for the seagrass environments where many seahorses live. In a seagrass meadow, the grass blades grow straight up from the seafloor toward the light. Swimming vertically allows seahorses to navigate this vertical structure more easily, to position themselves among the blades rather than trying to push through them horizontally. They become, in effect, part of the seagrass community, another vertical element in a vertical world. Watching a seahorse swim is like watching slow-motion footage. Each movement is deliberate, each shift in position calculated. There's no wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. The dorsal fin shimmers with effort, the pectoral fins make tiny adjustments, and gradually, so gradually, the seahorse inches forward through the water. And yet, despite their slowness, seahorses can make surprisingly quick movements when necessary. When striking at prey, a seahorse's head can snap forward with remarkable speed, closing the distance to its target in milliseconds. It's not sustained speed, but a brief explosion of motion, powered by specialized muscles that compress and then release like a spring. This strike speed is essential for their hunting success, allowing them to capture prey that would otherwise escape. As you rest tonight, imagine the gentle pace of seahorse life. No rushing, no hurry, no frantic swimming. Just calm, patient movement through quiet waters. The flutter of a dorsal fin, catching the light. The slow rotation of a body as it turns to face a new direction. The careful, measured progress through a seagrass meadow at a pace that honors the present moment. In a world that often moves too fast, the seahorse reminds us that slowness can be its own kind of grace. If you were to dive in waters where seahorses live, you might swim right past dozens of them without seeing a single one. Despite their distinctive shape, despite their relative abundance in some areas, seahorses are extraordinarily difficult to spot. They are masters of camouflage, able to vanish completely against their backgrounds, and some species take this ability to almost supernatural extremes. The secret lies in their skin. Seahorse skin contains specialized cells called chromatophores, which are like tiny packets of pigment that can expand or contract. When these cells expand, they spread their color across more area, making the seahorse appear darker or more intensely colored. When they contract, pulling their pigment into a tiny concentrated point, the seahorse becomes paler, allowing other colors to show through. But seahorses have more than just chromatophores. They also possess iridophores and leucophores, cells that reflect light rather than absorbing it. Iridophores create iridescent effects, shimmering colors that shift with viewing angle. Leucophores reflect white light, helping seahorses appear brighter or creating highlights against darker backgrounds. By combining these different types of cells, seahorses can create an impressive range of colors and patterns. The ability to change color serves several purposes. Most obviously, it provides camouflage against predators. A seahorse that matches the color of the seagrass, it's anchored to becomes nearly invisible to passing fish that might otherwise eat it. But color change also plays a role in communication. During courtship, seahorses often become dramatically brighter, shifting from muted browns and greens to vibrant yellows, oranges, or reds. These color changes signal readiness to mate, attract potential partners, and help maintain pair bonds. The speed of color change varies by species and circumstance. Some changes happen gradually over hours or days as seahorses adjust to new surroundings. Other changes can occur in minutes or even seconds, particularly during emotional states like courtship displays or confrontations with rivals. There's something almost magical about watching a seahorse brighten before your eyes, as though someone is slowly turning up a dimmer switch on its colors. Environmental factors influence these color-changing abilities. Light intensity plays a role, water temperature affects the speed of change, and the specific habitat determines which colors are most useful. A seahorse living among red algae might develop a reddish tint over time. One living in green seagrass might shift toward yellows and greens. This adaptation to surroundings isn't just about current color, but about developing the right palette for that particular home. Some seahorse species have taken camouflage far beyond simple color matching. They've developed physical structures that help them blend in even more completely with their environments. Small, branching filaments called cirri grow from their bodies, mimicking the algae or hydroids that grow on nearby surfaces. To a predator or to a human observer, the seahorse becomes just another bit of the reef, another piece of the seagrass meadow's texture. The pygmy seahorses represent the absolute pinnacle of this camouflage art. Audubon's pygmy seahorse, for instance, lives exclusively on Gorgonian sea fans, large coral colonies that can grow to several meters across. The seahorse's body is covered with bulbous tubercles, knob-like structures that perfectly match the polyps of the Gorgonian coral. Its body color matches the stem of the coral, whether gray with red tubercles or yellow with orange tubercles, depending on which Gorgonian species it inhabits. This camouflage is so perfect that Bargevant's pygmy seahorse wasn't discovered by marine biologists looking for it. Instead, it was found by accident when a researcher named George Bargevant collected a Gorgonian coral specimen in 1969 and brought it back to his laboratory. While examining the coral under a microscope, he happened to notice a tiny pair of seahorse clinging to its surface. They had been there all along, invisible in the ocean, invisible even during collection, only revealing themselves under close laboratory examination. Other pygmy species have evolved similar strategies. Denise's pygmy seahorse can live on multiple types of Gorgonians, adjusting its color to match whichever coral it chooses as home. The whaler pygmy seahorse lives only on soft corals of a particular beige color, perfectly matching that specific hue. Some pygmy seahorses have smooth bodies, others are covered in texture. Each adaptation reflects the specific environment where that species evolved. The Pontohoi pygmy seahorse has taken a different approach. Rather than living on coral, it inhabits algae and seagrasses, often in shallower water. Its body lacks the tubercles of coral-dwelling pygmies, but it has fine filaments along its back that look like hair or algae strands, creating a mane-like appearance. When positioned among similar vegetation, these seahorse become nearly impossible to distinguish from their surroundings. Even larger seahorse species employ impressive camouflage. The lined seahorse of the Atlantic can vary its color dramatically, from nearly black to pale yellow, with stripes that help break up its outline. The thorny seahorse, covered in sharp spines and elaborate appendages, looks more like a piece of coral or a spiny marine plant than an animal. These spines aren't just for show, they also provide some protection from predators who might be deterred by the apparent difficulty of swallowing such a spiky meal. Camouflage serves a dual purpose for seahorses. It hides them from predators like crabs, larger fish, and rays, but it also helps them hunt. When a seahorse is invisible against its background, prey animals swim close without realizing the danger. The seahorse remains motionless, patient, waiting for prey to come within range of that lightning-quick suction strike. The camouflage transforms the seahorse from a potential meal into an invisible hunter. There's a cost to being so well camouflaged, though. Scientists studying seahorse populations often struggle to count them or assess their numbers precisely because they're so hard to see. Conservation efforts can be hampered by the simple fact that researchers can't find the animals they're trying to protect. A seagrass bed might harbor dozens of seahorses, but to the human eye, it might appear empty. The camouflage abilities of seahorses remind us that in nature, being seen isn't always advantageous. Sometimes the greatest power is the ability to disappear, to become part of the background, to watch the world without the world watching back. In their quiet, invisible way, seahorses have perfected this art over millions of years. As you sink deeper into rest tonight, imagine those seahorses, perfectly still among waving seagrass blades, their colors shifting subtly to match the dappled light filtering down through the water. Imagine the pygmy seahorses on their Gorgonian corals, so small and so perfectly camouflaged that they've become part of the coral itself, indistinguishable, safe, invisible. In the art of disappearing, they've found a way to persist. The seahorse family is larger and more diverse than many people realize. Scientists currently recognize approximately 46 to 48 distinct species in the genus Hippocampus, though this number continues to evolve as new species are discovered and old classifications are refined. These species vary enormously in size, color, habitat preference, and behavior, united primarily by their shared unusual body plan and their unique approach to reproduction. Let's begin our tour of this diverse family with the giants. The big-bellied seahorse, Hippocampus abdominalis, holds the record as the largest seahorse species in the world. Found in the cool waters off southern Australia and New Zealand, adults can reach 35 centimeters in height, measured from tail tip to coronet. That's roughly 14 inches, about the length of a dinner plate standing on edge. These impressive animals live in relatively deep water by seahorse standards, sometimes found at depths of over 100 meters, though they're more common in shallower kelp forests and seagrass beds. The big-bellied seahorse gets its name from the male's enormous brood pouch during pregnancy, which swells to dramatic proportions as it fills with developing young. Males of this species can carry several hundred offspring at once, making them look distinctly pot-bellied, hence their alternative common name, the pot-bellied seahorse. At the opposite end of the size spectrum are the pygmy seahorses, which we'll explore in more detail shortly, but it's worth noting here just how tiny they can be. Satomi's pygmy seahorse, discovered in Indonesian waters and described in 2008, measures just 13 to 14 millimeters in total length. That's about half an inch. Smaller than many human fingernails. An entire adult seahorse, fully mature and capable of reproduction, no bigger than a grain of rice. Between these extremes lie the majority of seahorse species, most measuring between 10 and 20 centimeters in height. The lined seahorse of the Atlantic coast, Hippocampus erectus, is a common species often seen in seagrass beds from Nova Scotia down to Venezuela. They're slender, elegant animals with subtle stripes along their bodies and small coronets. In northern waters, they're typically dark brown or black, while southern populations often show yellows and oranges. The common seahorse, Hippocampus cuda, ranges throughout the Indo-Pacific and shows remarkable color variation. Some individuals are yellow, others brown, some nearly white or cream-colored. They have smooth bodies without the elaborate spines and appendages of some other species. Their wide distribution and adaptability have made them one of the most frequently studied seahorse species, and unfortunately, also one of the most heavily collected for traditional medicine and the aquarium trade. In the Mediterranean Sea, two species coexist: the long-snouted seahorse, Hippocampus gutulatus, and the short-snouted seahorse, Hippocampus hippocampus. Despite their similar ranges, these species occupy slightly different niches, with the long-snouted preferring deeper water and the short-snouted more common in shallow seagrass beds. Both species can change color dramatically, and both have populations scattered across the eastern Atlantic as well as the Mediterranean. Off the coast of Britain and Ireland, these same two species represent the only seahorses in British waters. Finding them requires patience and often luck, as they're relatively rare in these northern waters. But they're there, clinging to seagrass and kelp in bays and estuaries, proof that seahorses can adapt to cooler temperatures than their primarily tropical reputation might suggest. The thorny seahorse, Hippocampus hystrix, lives in the Indo-Pacific and is covered in sharp spines and elaborate fleshy appendages. It's one of the more armored-looking seahorses, with long spines projecting from its body that make it appear larger and more threatening than it actually is. These spines serve as both camouflage, breaking up the seahorse's outline among spiny corals and sea urchins, and deterrence, making the seahorse less appealing to potential predators. Some seahorse species have remarkably restricted ranges. The Carneysnar seahorse, Hippocampus capensis, lives only in a few estuaries in South Africa, making it one of the world's most geographically limited fish species. It's also one of only a few seahorse species that can tolerate the mixing of fresh and salt water that occurs in estuaries. Most seahorses are strictly marine, unable to survive in water that's too fresh. White seahorse, Hippocampus whitey, is native to the east coast of Australia and has become the focus of considerable conservation attention. This species shows remarkable color variation, with individuals ranging from yellow to brown to reddish, often with white speckles or blotches. They've been studied extensively, particularly their reproduction and pair bonding behaviors, providing much of what we know about seahorse social life. The Pacific seahorse, Hippocampus ingens, is one of the larger species, found along the western coast of the Americas from California down to Peru. These seahorses can reach 30 centimeters in length and are found in relatively deep water, sometimes below 50 meters. They've been heavily targeted by fisheries, leading to population declines and increasing conservation concern. Many seahorse species remain poorly understood. Some are known from only a handful of specimens. Others have never been studied in their natural habitats. The IUCN Red List, which assesses the conservation status of species worldwide, lists many seahorses as data deficient, meaning scientists simply don't have enough information to determine whether they're threatened or not. New seahorse species continue to be discovered. In the past 2 decades, several new species have been described, particularly among the pygmy seahorses. This suggests that the total number of seahorse species might be higher than we currently recognize. There may be seahorses living in unexplored reefs, in deep water, or in remote areas that haven't yet been seen by scientists. Despite their diversity, all seahorses share certain fundamental characteristics. All have that distinctive upright posture. All have prehensile tails. All have male pregnancy. All have tubular snouts and no stomach. These shared features define what it means to be a seahorse, connecting the tiny pygmies to the giant big bellies, linking species from opposite sides of the world into one remarkable family. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine seahorses in all their diversity, giants swaying in kelp forests off New Zealand, tiny pygmies clinging to gorgonians in Indonesian waters, lined seahorses in Caribbean seagrass, thorny seahorses camouflaged among Indo-Pacific coral, each one different, each one unique, each one perfectly adapted to its particular corner of the ocean. Among all the wonders of the seahorse family, the pygmy seahorses stand apart. These are not just small seahorses, they are extraordinarily, almost impossibly tiny, living at the very limits of what we might expect for a vertebrate animal. And their lives are so specialized, so perfectly adapted to their particular environments, that they challenge our understanding of what animals can become through evolution. The story of pygmy seahorses begins in 1969 with that accidental discovery we mentioned earlier.
Georges Bargibant,
working in New Caledonia, was collecting gorgonian corals for the Noumea Museum. These sea fans, with their branching structures and colorful surfaces, were beautiful specimens worthy of study. But when Bargibant examined one of his collected gorgonians more closely, he noticed something extraordinary. There, perfectly camouflaged against the coral's surface, were two tiny seahorses, each barely 2 centimeters long. This was Hippocampus bargabanti, Bargabant's pygmy seahorse, the first of these miniature species to be recognized by science. For decades it remained the only known pygmy seahorse, a curiosity, an outlier. But in the early 2000s, as divers and researchers began looking more carefully at gorgonians and soft corals, more pygmy species began to reveal themselves. Denise's pygmy seahorse was described in 2003, named after Denise Tackett, an underwater photographer who helped document these tiny animals. This species is even smaller than Bargabant's, measuring just over 1 centimeter at maturity. Unlike Bargabant's pygmy, which lives exclusively on one type of gorgonian, Denise's pygmy shows more flexibility, found on at least 10 different species of sea ferns and even on whip coral bushes. In 2008, 3 more pygmy species were described all at once, a remarkable year for seahorse discovery. Pontoi's pygmy seahorse, found in Indonesia, is unusual among pygmies because it doesn't live on gorgonians at all. Instead, it inhabits algae and seagrasses, often in relatively shallow water just a few meters deep. Its body lacks the tubercles of coral-dwelling pygmies but has fine filaments along its back that create a mane-like appearance. Satomi's pygmy seahorse, also described in 2008, holds the record as the world's smallest seahorse species. These nocturnal animals measure just over 1 centimeter in length and are free-living, not attached to any particular coral. They're found on coral walls with soft corals, active at night when they emerge to feed. In 2018, another pygmy species was described from Japanese waters. The Japanese pygmy seahorse, sometimes called the Japan pig seahorse, lives in temperate waters rather than tropical ones, expanding our understanding of where pygmy seahorses can survive. Found on algal turfs on subtropical reefs, this species proves that pygmy seahorses aren't limited to warm tropical waters. Most recently, in 2020, the Sodwana pygmy seahorse was described from South Africa, the first pygmy seahorse found in African waters. This discovery suggests that pygmy seahorse may be more widespread than we've realized, but there might be species waiting to be found in other parts of the world's oceans. What makes pygmy seahorses true pygmies, distinct from merely small seahorses? Scientists define true pygmy seahorses by specific anatomical features. They have a single gill opening at the back of the head, rather than 2 openings on the sides like other seahorses. Males brood their young inside the body cavity, in what's called trunk brooding, rather than in an external pouch on the tail. And they're all remarkably small, measuring less than 2.7 centimeters at maximum size. The life of a pygmy seahorse is one of extreme specialization. Bargabant's pygmy seahorse, for instance, spends its entire adult life on a single gorgonian coral. Once it settles as a juvenile, it never leaves. The gorgonian provides everything: shelter, camouflage, hunting grounds, a place to mate and raise young. These corals can live for over 100 years, and a pygmy seahorse might spend its entire life on the same coral that will outlive it by decades. This extreme habitat specialization makes pygmy seahorses particularly vulnerable. If the coral dies from disease, from warming waters, from physical damage, the seahorses living on it die too. They can't simply swim to another coral. They're too small, too vulnerable in open water, too perfectly adapted to their particular home. Population densities of pygmy seahorses are among the lowest ever measured for seahorses. A single gorgonian might host just 1 or 2 individuals. Sometimes up to 28 have been recorded on exceptionally large corals, but typically the numbers are small. Despite their size, pygmy seahorses are complete, fully functional seahorses. Males become pregnant just like their larger cousins, carrying 6 to 34 embryos depending on species. The gestation period for Denise's pygmy seahorse is 11 to 14 days. After birth, the tiny fry, each smaller than a sesame seed, enter a planktonic phase, drifting in the ocean currents for 2 to 3 weeks before settling onto their chosen habitat. Pygmy seahorses feed on even tinier crustaceans, zooplankton so small they're nearly invisible to the human eye. The seahorses hover near their coral homes, waiting for appropriate prey to drift past, then striking with that same vacuum-like suction feeding method their larger relatives use. just on a microscopic scale. As you rest tonight, imagine these tiny seahorses, no larger than a grain of rice, clinging to massive Gorgonian corals that tower above them like buildings. Imagine their perfect camouflage, their tubercles matching the coral's polyps precisely, their colors blending seamlessly with the coral's tissues. They are there, living their small, perfect lives, reminders that wonder exists at every scale in the ocean. The daily life of a seahorse is not one of adventure or wide-ranging exploration. Instead, it's a life of patience, of routine, of small territories carefully maintained. Most seahorse species are largely solitary outside of breeding, preferring their own space, their own carefully chosen patch of seagrass or section of reef. Territories vary in size between species and between the sexes. Female seahorses typically maintain larger territories, sometimes ranging over 100 square meters. They move through this area throughout the day, feeding, resting, checking familiar landmarks. Male territories, by contrast, are remarkably small. Some male seahorses maintain territories of less than 1 square meter, an area smaller than a typical doormat. Why the difference in territory size? Scientists believe it relates to the different roles males and females play in reproduction. Males become pregnant, which limits their mobility and makes ranging over large areas impractical. Better to establish a small, easily defended space with good food resources and shelter. Females need to find males, assess multiple potential mates, and maintain awareness of the broader environment. Seahorses are site faithful, meaning they return to the same locations regularly. A seahorse might have several favorite holdfast points within its territory, places where it anchors its tail and waits for prey. It might return to the same seagrass blade each evening, wrapping its tail around that familiar stem. The day begins at dawn for many seahorse species, particularly those in pair bonds. This is when the morning greeting ritual occurs, that daily dance we'll explore in more detail when we discuss courtship. But even unpaired seahorse become more active at first light. During daylight hours, seahorses spend much of their time hunting. They position themselves among vegetation or coral, anchored by their tails, and wait. Their eyes scan independently, covering nearly 360 degrees of vision. When appropriate prey drifts within range, the seahorse strikes, its head snapping forward faster than the eye can follow. Between hunting sessions, seahorses rest. Maintaining position in the water requires constant small adjustments of the dorsal fin, which is tiring. So seahorses anchor firmly with their tails, allowing their fins to rest, conserving energy. They might remain in one spot for hours, barely moving, appearing almost inanimate. As afternoon shifts to evening, activity patterns change. Some species become more active at dusk, perhaps taking advantage of the changing light to hunt during that liminal time when day becomes night. Others retreat to sheltered spots, seeking protection during the hours of darkness when nocturnal predators are most active. Nighttime behavior remains relatively understudied for most seahorse species. Some evidence suggests seahorses continue hunting at night, particularly species that feed on nocturnal zooplankton. Other species seem to enter a rest state, remaining anchored and motionless until dawn. Seasonal patterns also influence seahorse behavior. In temperate regions, where water temperatures vary significantly between summer and winter, seahorses adjust their activity levels, their feeding rates, their metabolism. During cold winters, some species become semi-dormant, moving to deeper, more stable waters and reducing their activity to conserve energy. Social interactions between seahorses, when they occur, are generally gentle. They don't form schools or shoals the way many fish do. When two seahorses encounter each other, the interaction is typically brief. They might inspect each other, change color slightly, adjust position, and then separate. The pace of seahorse life is one of patience and routine. There are no long migrations, no dramatic hunting sequences, no complex social hierarchies. Just the gentle cycle of day and night, the steady rhythm of hunting and resting, the gradual passage of seasons. As you continue to relax tonight, imagine a seahorse in its small territory. Imagine it anchored to its favorite seagrass blade, the one it returns to every evening. The water around it gradually darkens as the sun sets above the surface. Small fish pass by, casting brief shadows. The seahorse shifts slightly, adjusting its grip, its dorsal fin fluttering gently to maintain position. Everything is familiar. everything is calm. For creatures so slow, so seemingly gentle, seahorses are surprisingly deadly hunters. Their success rate in capturing prey is approximately 90%, one of the highest hunting success rates in the entire animal kingdom. To put this in perspective, lions, often considered apex predators, have a success rate of only about 25%. How do they achieve this remarkable feat? The answer lies in a combination of patience, camouflage, stealth, and explosive speed at the critical moment. Seahorses are ambush predators, employing a strategy known as sit and wait hunting. They position themselves among vegetation or coral, anchored by their tails, and simply wait for prey to drift within range. Their camouflage is the first key to their success. A seahorse that's invisible to its prey can allow that prey to approach much closer than an obvious predator could. Small crustaceans, the primary food of most seahorse, have excellent escape responses. They can detect water movements, can sense approaching danger, can shoot backward or sideways with remarkable speed when threatened. But if they don't know the danger is there, if the seahorse appears to be just another piece of seagrass or coral, they swim close without taking evasive action. The seahorse's ability to remain motionless plays a crucial role. Unlike fish that must swim continuously to breathe or maintain position, seahorses can hang perfectly still for long periods, anchored by their tails, their bodies gently swaying with the natural movement of the vegetation around them. This stillness means they create almost no water disturbance, no ripples or currents that prey animals might detect. Studies using high-speed cameras have revealed the mechanics of the seahorse strike in extraordinary detail. When appropriate prey comes within range, typically within about 1 centimeter of the snout, the seahorse's head rotates upward at incredible speed. Simultaneously, the mouth opens and a powerful suction is generated. The entire strike, from initiation to prey capture, takes less than 1 millisecond. That's faster than a human can blink, faster than most prey animals can react. The creation of this suction involves complex coordination of multiple anatomical structures. The seahorse expands its head, increasing the volume of its mouth cavity rapidly. This creates negative pressure, a vacuum effect that draws water and prey into the mouth with tremendous force. For tiny prey animals, this suction is irresistible. Once inside the mouth, prey is quickly swallowed whole. Remember, seahorses have no teeth, no way to chew or break down food. Whatever they catch must be small enough to pass through their tubular snout and be swallowed in one piece. This limits seahorses to relatively small prey, mostly tiny crustaceans like copepods, mysid shrimp, amphipods, and other zooplankton. Different seahorse species specialize in different types of prey. The dwarf seahorse, being very small itself, feeds primarily on copepods, tiny crustaceans that drift in the water column. Larger species like the big-bellied seahorse can take bigger prey, including caridean shrimp and pericarids. The lack of a stomach means seahorses must eat almost constantly. Food passes through their simple digestive system in just a few hours, which means they're hungry again almost as soon as they've finished digesting the last meal. Adult seahorses might eat 30 to 50 times a day. Seahorse fry, the babies, have even more extreme needs, consuming up to 3,000 pieces of food per day as they grow rapidly. This constant need to eat ties seahorses to areas with abundant prey. They can't range far from good hunting grounds. If food becomes scarce, seahorses suffer quickly. They can't store energy effectively, can't go more than a day or two without eating before their condition deteriorates. In areas with dense vegetation, seahorses often use a sit-and-wait strategy, anchoring to a plant and waiting for prey to pass by. In more open areas with less vegetation, some seahorses have been observed swimming slowly along the bottom, searching more actively for food. Seahorses' eyes, which move independently, allow them to scan for prey while remaining otherwise motionless. One eye might be watching a potential meal approaching from one direction while the other eye monitors a different area. This 360-degree vision is a significant advantage for animals that hunt by ambush. Interestingly, seahorses seem to learn from experience. Juveniles initially have lower hunting success rates, missing strikes more often, not timing their attacks as well. With practice, success rates improve. This suggests that while the basic strike mechanics are instinctive, refining the skill requires trial and error. Tonight, as you drift deeper into relaxation, imagine a seahorse anchored among seagrass. Its eyes scan the water, moving independently, watching for the telltale movement of prey. A tiny mysid shrimp drifts closer, unaware of the danger. The seahorse remains perfectly still, calculating distance, judging the approach. Closer, closer, and then in a motion too fast to see, the head snaps up, the mouth opens, and the shrimp vanishes. Another successful hunt in a day of many meals. Among the many remarkable things about seahorses, few capture the imagination quite like their courtship behavior. These are animals that dance with their mates, that change colors during courtship, that engage in elaborate rituals lasting hours or even days. In the often harsh world of ocean survival, seahorses have retained something that almost seems like tenderness, like romance. Courtship in most seahorse species is not a brief encounter. It's a process, sometimes lasting several days before the actual transfer of eggs occurs. This extended courtship serves multiple purposes, synchronizing the reproductive cycles of male and female, building a bond between potential mates, and ensuring that both partners are ready for the complex process of egg transfer. The process typically begins with what scientists call Phase 1, the initial courtship phase. This usually takes place in the early morning, 1 or 2 days before actual mating. The male and female approach each other, and something remarkable happens. Their colors brighten. Seahorses that were dull brown or muted green suddenly become vibrant yellow, bright orange, or deep maroon. This brightening serves as a signal, a way of communicating readiness and interest. The two seahorses then begin to display. They quiver, their bodies vibrating rapidly in a way that looks almost like trembling. The male often initiates this, brightening his colors and beginning to quiver. The female responds about 5 seconds later with her own display, brightening and quivering in return. This reciprocal quivering continues, back and forth, a conversation in movement and color. Their tails are positioned close together during this display, often wrapped around the same holdfast, a blade of seagrass or piece of coral. They're close but not quite touching, their bodies angled slightly outward from the point of attachment. The male quivers and rotates his body toward the female. The female responds by rotating her body away, maintaining the distance while continuing the display. This first phase can last from a few minutes to over half an hour. Then the seahorses separate, swimming to different areas, and the courtship pauses. They don't stay together continuously during courtship. Instead, they come together for these displays, and then part, sometimes for hours, before reuniting to continue. The following phases occur on the day of actual copulation, building in intensity and complexity. Phase 2 is marked by pointing. The female raises her head, forming an oblique angle with her body, pointing upward. This posture makes her ovipositor, the organ she'll use to transfer eggs, more visible. The male leans away while continuing to quiver. This phase can last up to 54 minutes. After phase 2 comes a latency period, typically between 30 minutes and 4 hours. During this time, the seahorses display no courtship behavior. The female's colors fade to normal, but the male begins pumping, a behavior where he inflates and deflates his brood pouch repeatedly. This serves to show the female that his pouch is empty and ready to receive eggs. Phase 3 begins when the female brightens again and resumes pointing. The male responds with his own brightening and pointing display. They face each other, both pointing, both bright, both signaling readiness. This phase typically lasts about 9 minutes and can be repeated several times. The final phase is the climax of courtship. Both seahorses anchor to the same plant or coral, facing each other, still displaying their bright courtship colors. Then something beautiful happens. They release their grip on the anchor and begin to rise together through the water column. They ascend face to face, their heads held high, their bodies oriented vertically. As they rise, often spiraling around each other, they meet at the apex of their ascent. Here, suspended in mid-water, or slowly descending, the actual transfer occurs. The female's ovipositor extends from her body and fits precisely into the opening of the male's brood pouch. She deposits her eggs, sometimes hundreds of them, sometimes over 1,000 depending on the species. The whole transfer takes only a few seconds. The male fertilizes the eggs as they enter his pouch, and then the couple separates. They sink back to the bottom, their colors fade, and courtship is complete. The male is now pregnant. But courtship doesn't end with this one mating. In many seahorse species, particularly those that form long-term pair bonds. There's a daily ritual known as the morning greeting. Even after the male becomes pregnant, the pair reunites each morning shortly after dawn. They approach each other, change colors, link their tails together, and perform a simplified version of their courtship dance. This daily greeting typically lasts about 6 minutes. The pair might promenade together, swimming slowly side by side with tails linked. They might pirouette around a shared holdfast, circling together in a gentle spiral. Their bodies brighten visibly during these greetings. Some seahorses make clicking sounds by moving bones in their head, adding an audio component to their visual display. After the greeting, the pair separates for the rest of the day. This daily ritual serves multiple purposes. It reinforces the pair bond, keeping the relationship strong. It synchronizes their reproductive cycles, so that when the male gives birth, the female has prepared new eggs and is ready to mate again immediately. Scientists have observed that if one member of a pair is removed, the remaining seahorse often continues to visit their usual meeting spot at the usual time. They wait sometimes for days for their partner who never comes. This fidelity, this apparent attachment, suggests that seahorse pair bonds might involve something more than simple reproductive coordination. Not all seahorses form lifelong pairs, though. Research has shown that pair bond duration varies by species. Some seahorses maintain their bonds for a single breeding season. Others appear to mate with the same partner for years. And in some species, particularly when kept in groups, seahorses will readily switch mates when opportunities arise. As you continue to rest tonight, imagine two seahorses beginning their daily greeting. Dawn light filters down through clear water, illuminating a seagrass meadow. The female approaches the male's territory, and he swims out to meet her. Their bodies brighten, shifting from muted brown to vibrant yellow. They link their tails together and begin to move, swimming slowly in tandem, perfectly synchronized. Around and around they go. 6 minutes of intimate connection. Then they part, swimming back to their separate territories, but knowing they'll meet again at the same time tomorrow. The interconnectedness of life becomes clear when studying seahorses and their ecosystems. Seahorses depend on seagrass, which depends on clean water and appropriate light levels. Seagrass depends on herbivores that keep it from being overgrown by algae. Those herbivores depend on predators that control their populations. Predators depend on healthy populations of prey. It's all connected, all dependent, all part of a web so complex that removing one strand weakens the entire structure. Human communities are part of this web too. Coastal communities depend on healthy oceans for their livelihoods, whether through fishing, tourism, coastal protection, or cultural connections to the sea. When we protect seahorse habitats, we protect the ecosystems that support both marine biodiversity and human well-being. When we allow these habitats to degrade, everyone suffers the consequences through reduced fish stocks, degraded water quality, increased coastal erosion, and loss of the countless benefits healthy oceans provide. The economics of seahorse conservation are becoming clearer. While there are costs to establishing protected areas, changing fishing practices, and enforcing regulations, there are also enormous benefits. Healthy seagrass beds and coral reefs provide ecosystem services worth billions of dollars globally through coastal protection, fisheries support, carbon storage, and tourism value. The economic case for conservation often proves stronger than the case for unsustainable exploitation. Sustainable seahorse aquaculture represents an opportunity to meet some market demand without impacting wild populations. While challenges remain in making aquaculture economically competitive with wild harvest for traditional medicine markets, the technology continues to improve. Breeding facilities are developing more efficient techniques, reducing costs and increasing production. As wild populations decline and become harder to harvest, the economic equation may shift to favor aquaculture. Alternative livelihoods for fishing communities offer another pathway forward. In some regions, former seahorse collectors have found new income through ecotourism, leading seahorse watching tours for divers and snorkelers. Others have transitioned to aquaculture, raising seahorses or other species in ways that generate income without depleting wild stocks. These transitions require support, training, and capital, but they demonstrate that conservation and community well-being can be compatible. The role of women in seahorse conservation deserves special mention. In many fishing communities, women play crucial roles in processing and selling marine products, including seahorse. Conservation programs that engage women, recognize their contributions, and ensure they benefit from alternative livelihood opportunities tend to be more successful than those focused exclusively on male fishers. Indigenous and local knowledge about seahorses and their habitats contains valuable insights often overlooked by Western science. Communities that have lived alongside seahorses for generations possess deep understanding of seahorse behavior, seasonal patterns, and habitat requirements. Conservation efforts that incorporate this traditional knowledge alongside scientific research produce better outcomes than either approach alone. The spiritual and cultural dimensions of seahorse conservation matter too. In many cultures, seahorses hold symbolic significance beyond their economic value. They appear in creation stories, healing traditions, and cultural practices. Respecting these cultural connections and incorporating them into conservation frameworks can strengthen support for protection while honoring the diverse ways humans relate to nature. Youth engagement in seahorse conservation offers hope for the future. Programs that connect young people with seahorses through education, citizen science, and hands-on conservation activities cultivate the next generation of ocean advocates. Children who learn to appreciate seahorses often become adults who support marine conservation, creating lasting change that extends far beyond any single conservation project. Art and media play powerful roles in seahorse conservation by capturing imaginations and emotions in ways that scientific data alone cannot. Documentary films, photography, art exhibitions, and creative writing about seahorse reach audiences who might never read a scientific paper, but who can be moved by compelling stories and beautiful images. These creative works translate scientific understanding into forms that touch hearts and inspire action. The digital age provides new tools for seahorse conservation through social media, online databases, mobile apps, and virtual experiences. Citizen scientists can submit seahorse sightings instantly through smartphone apps. Conservation organizations can reach global audiences through social media campaigns. Virtual reality experiences can allow people who will never visit seahorse habitats to experience them nonetheless. These technologies democratize access to information and participation in conservation. International cooperation is essential for seahorse conservation because seahorses don't recognize borders, and neither do the threats they face. Pollution flows across boundaries. Climate change is global. Trade networks span continents. Effective conservation requires collaboration between nations, sharing of data and best practices, coordinated enforcement of trade regulations, and mutual support for conservation goals. The precautionary principle suggests that when facing uncertainty about environmental harm, we should err on the side of protection. We don't know exactly how many seahorses can be sustainably harvested. We don't know precisely how climate change will affect different populations. We don't know all the ways that losing seahorses might affect broader ecosystems. In the face of this uncertainty, taking protective action makes sense, ensuring we don't inadvertently push species to extinction before fully understanding the consequences. As you drift into your final moments before deep sleep, as the world fades and consciousness dims to nothing, carry with you one last image. Imagine a future ocean, decades or centuries from now. In this future, because of choices made today, seahorses still swim in seagrass meadows. Pygmy seahorses still cling to Gorgonian corals. Males still dance with their mates at dawn and give birth at night. The ancient patterns persist because humans chose to make space for them, to protect their habitats, to use resources sustainably, to care about the persistence of these remarkable animals. This future is possible. It's within reach. It requires effort and commitment, and sometimes difficult choices, but it's achievable. Every time someone chooses not to buy a dried seahorse curio, that future becomes slightly more likely. Every time a community establishes a protected area, that future draws closer. Every time a government enforces trade regulations or a consumer chooses sustainably, the thread strengthens. You've spent this time learning about seahorses, appreciating their wonder, understanding their challenges. That time wasn't wasted. It connected you to something larger than yourself, to the great web of life that encompasses all living things. It made you part of the story of seahorses and their conservation, and in some small but real way, it increases the probability that seahorses will persist, that future generations will have the opportunity to marvel at these improbable, impossible, perfect animals. Sleep now with gratitude and hope, gratitude for seahorses and all they teach us about patience, gentleness, and adaptation, hope for their future, and for our ability to protect them. Let sleep come completely, washing over you like a gentle tide, carrying you into rest as deep and peaceful as the quiet waters where seahorses make their homes. Dream of them if you dream, remember them when you wake, and carry their story with you, a small light of wonder in a world that needs all the wonder it can hold. The seahorses swim on, the ocean continues, life persists, and you, resting peacefully, are part of it all. Good night, sleep deeply, wake refreshed, and remember the seahorses. As you continue your descent into rest, let your own breathing slow and deepen, like a seahorse at rest, anchored securely, breathing steadily and calmly. Each breath brings what you need, releases what you don't. There's no effort, no struggle, just the natural rhythm of breath flowing in and out, sustaining life, maintaining peace. Your breathing, and the seahorse's breathing, different mechanisms, but the same fundamental process, connecting all living things in the shared need for oxygen, for breath, for life. Tonight, as you finally surrender to sleep, know that across the world's oceans, seahorses are breathing their steady rhythm, anchored in seagrass and coral, living their patient lives, and you, breathing your own steady rhythm, sinking into rest, a part of that same world, that same pattern of life, continuing through day and night, through seasons and years, through millions of years of evolution. Breathe deeply, rest completely, and let sleep come gently, like a tide rolling in, inevitable and peaceful and complete. Needing more coloration, stronger bodies, better swimming ability. Reaching reproductive maturity is the goal, the point at which a seahorse can contribute to the next generation. For males, this means developing a functional brood pouch. For females, it means being able to produce eggs. The dwarf seahorse might reach reproductive maturity in just a few months, while larger species might take a year or more. The lifespan of seahorses varies significantly by species. Smaller species, like the dwarf seahorse, typically live only about a year in the wild. Some of these tiny animals go through their entire life cycle within 12 months. Larger species live longer, with lifespans of 3 to 5 years being typical. The conversion rate from fry to reproductive adult is staggeringly low. Less than 1% survive. Consider what this means. A male seahorse might give birth to 500 offspring. Of those 500, perhaps only 2 or 3 will survive to reproduce. Sometimes only 1, sometimes none. This brutal mortality rate means that every adult seahorse we see represents an extraordinary survivor, an animal that beat impossible odds. They survived the planktonic phase. They found appropriate habitat. They avoided predators during vulnerable juvenile stages. They found enough food to grow and mature. Tonight, as you settle into deeper rest, imagine the journey of a single seahorse fry, born in darkness, expelled into the vastness of the ocean, drifting in currents for weeks, feeding on microscopic prey, somehow avoiding the countless predators, finally settling to a seagrass bed, anchoring its tiny tail, beginning to hunt, growing slowly but steadily, surviving storms, escaping predators, finding enough food, eventually reaching maturity, finding a mate, beginning the cycle again. Seahorses are fundamentally creatures of the coast, of the interface between land and sea, where the ocean is shallow, warm, and rich with life. Though seahorses can be found from the tropics to temperate zones, they almost universally prefer similar habitats, sheltered, shallow, structurally complex environments where they can hide, hunt, and survive. Seagrass beds are perhaps the quintessential seahorse habitat. These underwater meadows, where flowering plants have adapted to grow fully submerged in seawater, provide everything seahorses need. The grass blades themselves offer anchoring points, places where seahorses can wrap their tails and hold position against currents. The density of vegetation creates shelter, breaking up sightlines for predators. Seagrass beds also concentrate prey. The grass provides habitat for countless small invertebrates, the amphipods, copepods, and other crustaceans that seahorses feed on. The structure of the seagrass creates three-dimensional complexity, with prey animals living at multiple levels from the seafloor to the tips of the grass blades. The grass itself moves with the currents and waves, swaying gently, and seahorses positioned among the blades sway with it, their movements blending with the natural motion of their environment. This dynamic camouflage makes them extraordinarily difficult to spot. Coral reefs represent another major seahorse habitat, particularly for species in tropical waters and for the pygmy seahorses. Reefs provide even more structural complexity than seagrass, with countless nooks, crevices, and surfaces where seahorses can anchor and hide. The biodiversity of coral reefs means abundant prey. Pygmy seahorses, in particular, have evolved to live on specific types of coral. Bargabant's pygmy lives only on Muracella gorgonians. This intimate association with coral means that the seahorse's fate is tied directly to the coral's health. When coral bleaches or dies, the seahorses living on it face disaster. Mangrove forests, those remarkable trees that grow with their roots in salt water, create another habitat favored by several seahorse species. The tangle of mangrove roots provides shelter and anchoring points, while the fallen leaves and organic matter create rich feeding grounds. Mangroves also offer protection from waves and strong currents. The roots break up water movement, creating calmer conditions where seahorses can swim without exhaustion. During storms, seahorses in mangrove habitats fare better than those in more exposed locations. The depth at which seahorses live varies but is generally shallow. Most species are found in water less than 20 meters deep, and many prefer depths of just a few meters. This shallow preference has multiple explanations. Shallow water is warmer, has more light for plant growth, and supports higher productivity and more abundant prey. But some seahorse species venture deeper. The big-bellied seahorse can be found down to 100 meters or more. These deeper-dwelling seahorses often inhabit rocky reefs or coral formations, rather than seagrass. Seasonal movements affect habitat use in temperate regions. During summer, when water temperatures are warm and conditions calm, seahorses might be found in very shallow water, sometimes less than a meter deep. As winter approaches and storms become more frequent, many seahorses move to slightly deeper, more protected areas. Water temperature plays a major role in seahorse distribution and habitat preferences. Most species prefer temperatures between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius, typical of tropical and subtropical waters. At the extremes of their ranges, seahorses can tolerate cooler temperatures, down to about 15 degrees for some species. Pollution and habitat degradation pose serious threats to seahorse habitats. Coastal development destroys seagrass beds and mangroves. Sediment from construction and agriculture smothers seagrass and coral. Chemical pollution affects water quality, stressing seahorses and reducing prey populations. Bottom trawling, a fishing method where nets are dragged across the seafloor, is particularly destructive to seahorse habitats. Trawls tear up seagrass, flatten three-dimensional structure, and homogenize the seafloor. Areas that once had complex habitats supporting diverse communities become barren plains. Tonight, let your mind drift to a seagrass meadow in quiet shallows. Sunlight filters down through clear water, creating patterns of light and shadow on the sandy bottom. Grass blades sway gently in a nearly imperceptible current, and there, anchored to a grass blade, perfectly camouflaged, is a seahorse. It's been in this meadow for months, moving only within a small territory. This is its home, everything it needs within a few dozen meters. The story of seahorses in the modern world is unfortunately largely a story of decline. Despite their wide distribution and diversity of species, seahorse populations worldwide face a constellation of threats that have led to dramatic population reductions in many areas. The single largest threat to seahorses comes not from direct hunting but from accidental capture as bycatch in fisheries. Seahorses are rarely the target of fishing efforts. Instead, they're caught incidentally in nets and traps meant for other species, particularly shrimp trawls. Bottom trawling for shrimp operates by dragging large nets across the seafloor, scooping up everything in their path. Seahorses living in seagrass beds and on soft bottoms are swept up along with the target shrimp. Estimates suggest that tens of millions of seahorses are caught as bycatch globally each year. The traditional medicine trade, particularly traditional Chinese medicine, represents the largest consumer of dried seahorses. Approximately 20 to 25 million seahorses are traded globally each year for medicinal use, though the actual number is likely higher due to unreported and illegal trade. Seahorses have been used in traditional medicine for centuries, believed to treat various conditions including impotence, asthma, and circulatory problems. They're typically dried and ground into powder, fermented in liquids, or included whole in medicinal preparations. Despite a lack of scientific evidence supporting these purported medical benefits, demand remains strong. Thailand has historically been the world's largest exporter of dried seahorses, with official records showing exports of approximately 5 million seahorses annually, though actual numbers are believed to be much higher. The curio trade represents another significant threat. Millions of seahorses are killed, dried, and sold as souvenirs, keychains, paperweights, and decorative items. Coastal tourist areas in many countries sell dried seahorses to visitors who may not realize that these were once living animals taken from increasingly depleted wild populations. The aquarium trade takes approximately 1 million seahorses from the wild annually. While this is smaller than the traditional medicine trade, it's still significant. Wild-caught seahorses historically had very poor survival rates in aquariums, with less than 1,000 out of every million captured surviving more than 6 weeks. However, captive breeding of seahorses for the aquarium trade has become increasingly successful. Several facilities now breed seahorses specifically for aquariums, reducing pressure on wild populations. Captive-bred seahorses are healthier, better adapted to aquarium conditions, and more readily accept frozen food. Habitat destruction and degradation pose fundamental threats to seahorses. Seagrass beds worldwide are declining due to coastal development, pollution, sedimentation, and warming waters. Coral reefs face bleaching events, ocean acidification, and physical destruction. Mangrove forests are cleared for development, aquaculture, and agriculture. Because seahorses are so tied to specific habitat types, and because they're poor swimmers with limited ability to relocate to new areas, habitat loss directly translates to population loss. A seahorse living in a seagrass bed that's destroyed has little ability to find a new home elsewhere. Climate change adds another layer of threat. Rising water temperatures can exceed the tolerance ranges of some species. Changes in prey abundance and distribution affect seahorses' ability to find food. Increased storm intensity can physically damage habitats. Recognition of these multiple threats led to a landmark conservation action in 2002. All seahorse species were listed on Appendix 2 of CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. This listing, which took effect in May 2004, was the first time marine fish of any kind were regulated under CITES. Appendix 2 listing doesn't ban seahorse trade, but it does regulate it. Countries that want to export seahorses must issue permits and must make non-detriment findings, essentially ensuring that the trade won't harm wild populations. The IUCN Red List assesses seahorse species individually. Currently, 2 species are listed as endangered, 10 as vulnerable, 26 as data deficient, and the remainder as least concern or not yet evaluated. Conservation efforts have expanded in recent decades. Project Seahorse, founded in 1996, has led research, policy advocacy, and on-the-ground conservation programs worldwide. They've worked with fishing communities, helped establish marine protected areas, and advocated for stronger trade regulations. Marine protected areas provide refuge for seahorses where fishing is restricted or prohibited. These protected areas allow populations to recover, provide source populations that can replenish nearby fished areas, and preserve critical habitat. Public awareness campaigns aim to reduce demand, particularly for curio seahorses. When tourists understand that dried seahorses were taken from declining wild populations, some choose not to purchase them. Despite conservation efforts, many seahorse populations continue to decline. In some areas where seahorses were once common, they've become rare or locally extinct. Fishers report that seahorses have become much harder to find. The future of seahorses depends on addressing multiple threats simultaneously, reducing bycatch, establishing effective protected areas, enforcing trade regulations, restoring damaged habitat, and addressing climate change all need to happen together. There's reason for hope though. Seahorses are resilient if given the chance. Populations can recover when habitats are protected, and fishing pressure is reduced. More people care about seahorses now than ever before. Tonight, as you continue towards sleep, think of seahorses clinging to seagrass in a protected marine reserve, a place where nets don't reach, where the grass grows dense and healthy. These seahorses are survivors, their populations recovering slowly, their future more secure than in unprotected waters nearby. We've journeyed tonight through the remarkable world of seahorses, from their ancient origins to their uncertain future, from the vast oceans they inhabit to the microscopic details of their unique anatomy. These creatures, so unlike any other fish, so perfectly adapted yet somehow improbable, have captivated human imagination for millennia. Think about what makes seahorses so special. They swim upright when nearly all other fish swim horizontally. They hunt with patience rather than speed, achieving success rates that would make any predator envious. They change colors, blend invisibly into their surroundings, and include species so tiny they're barely visible to the naked eye. Their courtship is a dance, a multi-day ritual of color and movement that seems almost romantic. They form bonds with their mates, greeting each other daily with gentle displays of connection. And then there's male pregnancy, that extraordinary biological innovation where fathers carry, nourish, and birth their young. Seahorses live slowly in a fast world. They can't flee from danger, can barely swim against moderate currents. Yet they persist in oceans full of swift predators and powerful forces. They've found their niche, their way of surviving by being small, patient, camouflaged, and reproductively clever. Every adult seahorse is a survivor of impossible odds. Out of hundreds of siblings, it was one of the few to survive the vulnerable fry stage. It found appropriate habitat, learned to hunt successfully, avoided countless predators, and reached maturity. The threats seahorses face are serious and ongoing. Habitat loss, bycatch, trade pressure, climate change, all combine to push populations downward. But humans are capable of care, of protection, of making space for other species to persist. As you drift now into deeper sleep, let your mind rest on an image of a seahorse in its element. Perhaps it's a tiny pygmy, barely visible against its Gorgonian coral home. Or perhaps it's a large pot-bellied seahorse, swaying in a kelp forest, its prehensile tail wrapped firmly around a kelp frond. Or maybe it's a seahorse in a warm Caribbean seagrass meadow at dawn. The water is calm, clear, and the light is just beginning to filter down from above. A female approaches a male's small territory, and he swims out to meet her. Their daily greeting ritual begins. Colors brighten, from muted brown to vibrant yellow. They link their tails together and begin their gentle dance. After 6 minutes, they part. The female swims back to her larger territory. The male returns to his hunting spot, his tail wrapping around the same seagrass blade he's been using for weeks. The day begins. The ocean is vast, home to countless species. Among all this diversity, seahorses occupy their own unique place. They're not the biggest, not the fastest, not the strongest, but they've found a way to persist, a strategy that has worked for 25 million years. In their upright posture, in their prehensile tails, in their armor-plated bodies and tubular snouts, seahorses show us that there are many ways to be a fish, many ways to survive in the ocean. The males who become pregnant remind us that nature doesn't follow our expectations. The courtship rituals, those elaborate dances and daily greetings, suggest that even in animals we might not credit with complex emotions, there can be behaviors that look remarkably like affection. The challenges seahorses face in the modern world are significant, but not insurmountable. Every person who chooses not to buy a dried seahorse souvenir helps. Every diver who reports a seahorse sighting contributes to scientific understanding. Scientists continue to study seahorses, learning new things each year. New species are discovered, new behaviors documented, new populations identified. Each discovery expands our understanding. The seahorses we see today in protected areas look just like the seahorses that lived millions of years ago. Evolution doesn't require constant change. Sometimes, once a good solution is found, it persists. As you sink deeper into rest now, let these thoughts drift away, the details fade, the facts and figures dissolve, and what remains is just the image of seahorses in water, swaying gently with the current. They're out there right now, in oceans around the world, anchored to seagrass and coral, hunting microscopic prey, performing their daily greetings, carrying their young. The water is warm where they live, or cool in temperate seas. but always moving gently. The seahorses grip their holdfasts with prehensile tails, their dorsal fins flutter invisibly fast, and their eyes scan independently. In a seagrass meadow off Florida, a lined seahorse wraps its tail around eel grass. In Indonesian waters, a bargabant's pygmy clings to its Gorgonian coral. Off Australia, a big-bellied seahorse rests in a kelp forest. In the Mediterranean, short-snouted seahorse drift through seagrass. They're everywhere seahorses can be, living their quiet lives, adding their unique presence to the ocean's diversity. Each one is an individual, with its own small territory, its own mate perhaps, its own daily routine. The night is deep now, and the ocean is dark except for the faint glow of bioluminescent plankton. Seahorses rest anchored securely, their colors dimmed for the night. They'll wake with the dawn as they always do and begin another day. And you, resting now, breathing slowly and deeply, are connected to these creatures in ways both obvious and subtle. The oxygen you breathe was produced in part by ocean phytoplankton. We're all part of the same planetary system, connected by chemistry and physics and the long history of evolution. Let your breathing match the gentle rhythm of ocean currents, in and out, slow and steady, like water flowing over a reef, like the rise and fall of tides. Your body is relaxed, heavy, comfortable. Your mind is quiet, thoughts drifting like plankton in water. The seahorses continue their slow movements, a tiny adjustment of the dorsal fin, a subtle shift in tail grip, the patient waiting for prey, everything in its time, nothing rushed. In this moment, there's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. Like a seahorse anchored to its seagrass blade, you're secure, supported, at rest. The day's activities are over. Tomorrow's concerns can wait. The seahorses in their ocean, and you in your bed, both at rest, both part of the same world, both worthy of peace and protection and care. May you sleep as deeply as the ocean is deep, as peacefully as calm water in a sheltered bay. The dorsal fins flutter gently, the tails grip securely, the eyes begin to close as night deepens, and slowly, quietly, everything settles into stillness, into rest, into the profound peace that comes when we stop fighting and simply surrender to sleep. Good night, and may your dreams be as gentle as a seahorse's dance, as colorful as their courtship displays, and as peaceful as calm water at dawn. Sleep well. The seahorses will still be there in the morning, continuing their ancient ways. Rest now, let go, and drift gently into sleep.